Chapter 2 of Confidence. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Confidence by Henry James, Chapter 2. 2 months later, Bernard Longueville was at Venice, still under the impression that he was leaving Italy. He was not a man who made plans and held to them. He made them. Indeed, few men made more. But he made them as a basis for variation. He had gone to Venice to spend a fortnight, and his fortnight had taken the form of 8 enchanting weeks. He had still a sort of a conviction that he was carrying out his plans, for it must be confessed that where his pleasure was concerned, he had considerable skill in accommodating his theory to his practice. His enjoyment of Venice was extreme, but he was roused from it by a summons he was indisposed to resist. This consisted of a letter from an intimate friend who was living in Germany, a friend whose name was Gordon Wright. He had been spending the winter in Dresden, but this letter bore the date of Baden-Baden. As it was not long, I may give it entire. I wish very much that you would come to this place. I think you have been here before, so that you know how pretty it is and how amusing. I shall probably be here the rest of the summer. There are some people I know and whom I want you to know. Be so good as to arrive. Then I will thank you properly for your various Italian rhapsodies. I can't reply on the same scale. I haven't the time. Do you know what I am doing? I am making love. I find it a most absorbing occupation. That is literally why I have not written to you before. I've been making love ever since the last of May. It takes an immense amount of time, and everything else has got terribly behindhand. I don't mean to say that the experiment itself has gone on very fast, but I am trying to push it forward. I haven't yet had time to test its success, but in this I want your help. You know we great physicists never make an experiment without an assistant. A humble individual who burns his fingers and stains his clothes in the cause of science, but whose interest in the problem is only indirect. I want you to be my assistant, and I will guarantee that your burns and stains shall not be dangerous. She is an extremely interesting girl, and I really want you to see her. I want to know what you think of her. She wants to know you too, for I have talked a good deal about you. There you have it, if gratified vanity will help you on the way. Seriously, this is a real request. I want your opinion, your impression. I want to see how she will affect you. I don't say I ask for your advice. That, of course, you will not undertake to give. But I desire a definition, a characterization. You know you toss off those things. I don't see why I shouldn't tell you all this. I have always told you everything. I have never pretended to know anything about women. But I have always supposed that you knew everything. You certainly have always had the tone of that sort of omniscience. So come here as soon as possible, and let me see that you are not a humbug. She's a very handsome girl. Longueville was so much amused with this appeal that he very soon started for Germany. In the reader, Gordon Wright's letter will perhaps excite surprise rather than hilarity, but Longueville thought it highly characteristic of his friend. What it especially pointed to was Gordon's want of imagination, a deficiency which was a matter of common jocular allusion between the two young men, each of whom kept a collection of acknowledged oddities as a playground for the other's wit. Bernard had often spoken of his comrade's want of imagination as a bottomless pit, into which Gordon was perpetually inviting him to lower himself. "My dear fellow," Bernard said, "you must really excuse me. I cannot take these subterranean excursions. I should lose my breath down there. I should never come up alive. You know I have dropped things down, little jokes and metaphors, little fantasies and paradoxes, and I have never heard them touch bottom." This was an epigram on the part of a young man who had a lively play of fancy. But it was none the less true that Gordon Wright had a firmly treading rather than a winged intellect. Every phrase in his letter seemed, to Bernard, to march in stout-soled walking boots, and nothing could better express his attachment to the process of reasoning things out than this proposal that his friend should come and make a chemical analysis, a geometrical survey of the lady of his love. That I shall have any difficulty in forming an opinion, and any difficulty in expressing it when formed, of this he has as little idea as that he shall have any difficulty in accepting it when expressed. So Bernard reflected as he rolled in the train to Munich. Gordon's mind, he went on, has no atmosphere. His intellectual process goes on in the void. There are no currents and eddies to affect it, no high winds nor hot suns, no change of season and temperature. His premises are neatly arranged, and his conclusions are perfectly calculable. Yet for the man on whose character he so freely exercised his wit, Bernard Longueville had a strong affection. It is nothing against the validity of a friendship that the parties to it have not a mutual resemblance. There must be a basis of agreement, but the structure reared upon it may contain 1,000 disparities. These two young men had formed an alliance of old, in college days, and the bond between them had been strengthened by the simple fact of its having survived the sentimental revolutions of early life. Its strongest link was a sort of mutual respect. Their tastes, their pursuits were different, but each of them had a high esteem for the other's character. It may be said that they were easily pleased, or it is certain that neither of them had performed any very conspicuous action. They were highly civilized young Americans, born to an easy fortune and a tranquil destiny, and unfamiliar with the glitter of golden opportunities. If I did not shrink from disparaging the constitution of their native land for their own credit, I should say that it had never been very definitely proposed to these young gentlemen to distinguish themselves. On reaching manhood, they had each come into property sufficient to make violent exertion superfluous. Gordon Wright indeed had inherited a large estate. Their wants being tolerably modest, they had not been tempted to strive for the glory of building up commercial fortunes, the most obvious career open to young Americans. They had indeed embraced no career at all, and if summoned to give an account of themselves, would perhaps have found it hard to tell any very impressive story. Gordon Wright was much interested in physical science and had ideas of his own on what is called the endowment of research. His ideas had taken a practical shape, and he had distributed money very freely among the investigating classes, after which he had gone to spend a couple of years in Germany, supposing it to be the land of laboratories. Here we find him at present, cultivating relations with several learned bodies and promoting the study of various tough branches of human knowledge by paying the expenses of difficult experiments. The experiments, it must be added, were often of his own making, and he must have the honor of whatever brilliancy attaches, in the estimation of the world, to such pursuits. It was not, indeed, a brilliancy that dazzled Bernard Longueville, who, however, was not easily dazzled by anything. It was because he regarded him in so plain and direct a fashion that Bernard had an affection for his friend, an affection to which it would perhaps be difficult to assign a definite cause. Personal sympathies are doubtless caused by something, but the causes are remote, mysterious to our daily vision, like those of the particular state of the weather. We content ourselves with remarking that it is fine, or that it rains, and the enjoyment of our likes and dislikes is by no means apt to borrow its edge from the keenness of our analysis. Longueville had a relish for fine quality, superior savor, and he was sensible of this merit in the simple, candid, manly, affectionate nature of his comrade, which seemed to him an excellent thing of its kind. Gordon Wright had a tender heart and a strong will, a combination which, when the understanding is not too limited, is often the motive of admirable actions. There might sometimes be a question whether Gordon's understanding were sufficiently unlimited, but the impulses of a generous temper often play a useful part in filling up the gaps of an incomplete imagination, and the general impression that Wright produced was certainly that of intelligent good nature. The reasons for appreciating Bernard Longueville were much more manifest. He pleased superficially as well as fundamentally. Nature had sent him into the world with an armful of good gifts. He was very good-looking, tall, dark, agile, perfectly finished, so good-looking that he might have been a fool and yet be forgiven. As has already been intimated, however, he was far from being a fool. He had a number of talents, which, during 3 or 4 years that followed his leaving college, had received the discipline of the study of the law. He had not made much of the law, but he had made something of his talents. He was almost always spoken of as accomplished. People asked why he didn't do something. This question was never satisfactorily answered, the feeling being that Longueville did more than many people in causing it to be asked. Moreover, there was one thing he did constantly. He enjoyed himself. This is manifestly not a career, and it has been said at the outset that he was not attached to any of the recognized professions. But without going into details, he was a charming fellow, clever, urbane, free-handed, and with that fortunate quality in his appearance which is known as distinction. End of chapter 2.